Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
So today we're diving into the Quotable Hitchens to really look at the system of public argument itself. And this isn't just about clever insults or witty takedowns. It's about understanding the crucial and often uncomfortable role that sharp adversarial language plays in, well, stress testing the big ideas that shape our world.
And this quote right here, it gets straight to the heart of the problem. You see, power, it doesn't matter if it's religious or secular, has this tendency to build walls around itself. It labels certain ideas as off-limits, and in doing so, it creates these insulated systems that become, as Hitchens says, completely deaf to the one thing they need most: skepticism. So let's take a closer look at this systemic problem, shall we? How exactly do these powerful ideologies build their defensive walls, and how, ironically, does that very process make them incredibly fragile?
Well, the bricks and mortar of these walls are what you could call sacred narratives. These are the foundational stories, the core beliefs that a system treats as absolute, untouchable truth. You can't question them, you can't critique them. They are the non-negotiables holding the whole thing together.
And here is a perfect example of how that works. A narrative like the shepherd and the flock might sound comforting, right? Protective even. But think about the system it creates. It subtly reframes individuals into a passive group, a domesticated system that needs to be guarded, not just from outside dangers, but from the danger of thinking for itself.
Okay, so if you're up against these fortified walls, how do you even begin to check if they're sound? Let's talk about the specific tool designed to probe and test these belief systems.
This is exactly why a book like The Quotable Hitchens is so important. It's not just a collection of quotes to win an argument. You have to see it as a toolkit, or maybe even an arsenal of language, specifically engineered to find the weak points in any consensus and apply some serious pressure.
Now, the book's editor, Windsor Mann, draws a really critical line in the sand here. This isn't about being a contrarian, someone who just disagrees with whatever's popular for the sake of it. No, this is about what he calls oppositionism. It's a disciplined, principled skepticism aimed at power. It's a consistent method, not just a passing mood.
And this quote, it just perfectly captures the intention behind the tool. The sharpness is entirely deliberate. The way Hitchens saw it, being rude could be a surgical instrument, deployed not by accident, but as a calculated strategy to make an uncomfortable truth absolutely impossible to ignore.
So what actually happens when you start applying this tool? What kinds of patterns, what kinds of weaknesses does this adversarial language start to reveal in these insulated power structures? Well, the first major fault line appears right where humor collides with taboo. It's that moment when a joke is aimed directly at a topic an institution has declared sacred, and believe me, the reaction is always telling.
You see, any ideological system that can't handle a joke is basically telling on itself. It's revealing its own rigidity. When the authority figure gets baffled and starts demanding an explanation, they're exposing their own deep-seated insecurity. Power that has to explain why something isn't funny, well, it's already losing.
The next fault line is that classic gap between what an authority says and what it actually does. That hypocrisy creates a massive, glaring vulnerability, just waiting for someone to point it out.
This quote just nails how language is used for moral signaling. The person who insists they're above politics is almost always the most political person in the room. And that gap, that huge space between the signal and the substance, is a critical vulnerability in any system's claim to legitimacy.
And finally, one of the most powerful signs of a brittle system is how it reacts to being laughed at. It's not about being able to tell a joke. It's about how the system handles becoming the punchline.
This really is a crucial diagnostic test. An authority's inability to withstand a little sarcasm, a little ridicule, is a direct measure of just how fragile it is and how disconnected from reality it has truly become.
When you take all these patterns and put them together, they point toward a single, really powerful way to reframe this entire process. A whole new framework for understanding what public argument is even for.
Let's try this on for size. Let's think of adversarial language not as an act of aggression, but as a piece of stress-testing machinery. Its entire purpose is diagnostic. It's here to find out if an idea is actually strong enough to withstand some real-world pressure.
And here's how that machinery works. First, you isolate a sacred claim, an assumption that's never really been put to the test.
Then, you apply a targeted linguistic force, a sharp question, a bit of irony, maybe even a heretical thought. And finally, you just sit back and observe. The system's reaction, whether it's anger, fear, confusion, that tells you everything you need to know about its structural integrity.
And this, right here, is the big takeaway. This book helps us see public argument not as a war to be won, but as a kind of immune system for our collective ideas. The harsh criticism isn't about destruction, it's a form of systemic maintenance. It's a necessary repair process. Which leaves us with a final, provocative question to think about. What if we've been looking at public conflict all wrong? What if the arguments that make us the most uncomfortable are, in fact, the ones performing the most necessary repairs?
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a longer, audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.